Welcome to Jeanne Mayo's monthly leadership coaching resource, Youth Leaders Coach. Join us as Jeanne continues her 100X journey. She's with us today, giving more insight from her 5 inspiring decades in full-time leadership ministry. Thanks for being part of our long-distance family.
Welcome to this month's legacy. Stood up again. Oh gosh, one of my very favorite topics. I think because it is so ground zero for all of us in leadership, ministry, life. Just making sure that in a world of a million competing demands, Jesus Christ doesn't get the leftovers. A simple skit included in today's message that will be easy for you to act out, whether you're in youth ministry, young adult, children, and then you can make the message age appropriate. Can't think of anything much more important that I could talk about, so be sure to listen to the message. So in keeping with that whole essence of wanting to say to all of us as leaders, take care of yourself spiritually. Make that a priority. I want to talk to you about, one of the most important things that, oh golly, I was probably about halfway in the ministry, halfway into the 54 years before I began to realize the depth of importance of it. You know, I always took quote unquote sabbaticals, not on Sunday, because Sunday, if you're running a church, is not sabbatical, but I was a parent. And so for most of us, especially if we have families still at home, sabbatical can't be just putting our feet up and eating bonbons. You know, it's running errands, getting laundry caught up, going to a kid's practice or ball game. I mean, life is demanding. But nonetheless, this topic, no matter how demanding life is for all of us, is something that has played such a role in allowing me to stay in love with Jesus 54 years into full-time ministry. And I call it pit stops required. Now, in case you don't remember, I am an Indianapolis girl. I was born and raised Indianapolis, Indiana, Broad Ripple community area. My house now is a Mexican restaurant, and it's stinking good, by the way. 6524 Cornell Avenue. Stop by, it's great food. Having said that, Indianapolis is the home of the Indy 500. And so once a year, it was always a big deal. I never went to the actual race. My dad, I remember, would sit outside on Memorial Day and have his radio and crank it high. And that was before he came to faith in Christ. So he'd still get pretty drunk on those days, and he'd be sitting out there drinking his umpteenth beer and listening to the Indy 500. Now, again, I never went to it. I just don't know a whole lot about race cars, but I do know this obvious thing. Indy 500 or any extensive long-term racing could not have gone on without pit stops. There are those times in the race, all carefully planned by the driver and the crew. And there may be some emergency ones, but there are others planned where they stop and you regas. We check all of the main functions of the car. We make sure there's enough air in all of the tires, enough oil, everything. Without the pit stops, the journey can never be long haul. And I just want to say to you that, yeah, we all know about the importance of a Sabbath. And again, if you got a family at home, hopefully you're able to do a Sabbath that's more relaxing to you without a lot of depleting things coming at you emotionally. But having said that, we all then think of vacation, you know, that glorious moment that we're all going to take sometime during the year. But let's go a little further than that, because in the real world, with the real jobs, hey, you clock it in. You're there 9 to 5 or whatever. If you're doing ministry, it's probably a lot longer than 9 to 5. It's supposed to be 5 days a week, but in reality, that's not always at all the case. And usually your employer is not giving you extra days off to recoup. You've got to figure out, without violating your employer, how you take some pit stops. You know, I saw recently uh, a statement that said a lot of Christians are AWOL, AWOL, and they made it to stand for a worn out life. Really true. And so if you said to me, okay, why do you think people don't do ministry, full-time ministry, or even part-time, long haul? Oh gosh, there are a lot of reasons, demanding, all of that. But life is demanding, and life has disappointments and ups and downs. But how do you give yourself enough resilience to make the journey long haul? And I think the right kind of carefully planned and calendar pit stops has a lot to do with that. Now, real interesting, I studied October 25th, way back in 1999, long time ago, a twin-engine Learjet taxied down the runway, and it was headed for Dallas. 30 minutes later, all contact was lost with the pilots, and the contact was never able to be reestablished. And finally, the Air Patrol people sent 2 F-16s up to try to help whatever was going on. And they got within about 50 feet of the Learjet. They couldn't get any closer for obvious reasons. And then they saw what was going on. The windows and the windshield all the way around the plane were frozen over, iced over. As they did the after accident examination, obviously they figured out what had happened. The cabin pressure had diminished, the ability to control the temperature was gone, and it was, gosh, the plane kept flying straight. I mean, if you looked at it from the outside, it was great. Straight for another 1,400 miles. And it kept going for another 4 hours on autopilot, and finally crashed into a grassy field. And when it did crash, it was going about 600 miles per hour. And all 6 people aboard, including the pilots, were found dead, including a name that all the golfers will recognize, Payne Stewart, an amazing professional golfer. To the observer, the plane looked great. It was going straight. It was going fast. For a while, stayed on course. But reality was something very different in the cockpit than it was to the outside appearance. And so I want to say to all of us today as Christian leaders, what looks like as we look at other people, even as we look at ourselves, that we're flying straight, that we're doing fine, keeping up a good pace. What from the outside appears to be flying straight and high may be something very different inside our internal cockpit. It may be that slowly we've allowed our life with Jesus Christ to go on a bit of autopilot. And we all do that occasionally. But to allow that to go on and to allow that to become almost a pattern that we're halfway comfortable with, gosh, eventually we're headed for disaster because slowly we let our souls ice over. Please hear that. As one who's followed Jesus for a lot of years and certainly fought the whole time to keep her own intimacy with Christ, certainly have failed at that on different seasons, different times. But I will tell you, for all of us, it is easy for the internal cockpit to begin slowly to be very different from what it looks on the outside. And no, nobody's trying to be phony. Nobody's being an intentional hypocrite. Time and pace wear away at all of us. I remember, gosh, early in ministry, when I was seeing, and I still am seeing, by the way, I see a normal, regular medical doctor and then another medical doctor who is known as a naturopath. And I'm very blessed to have two of them. They may have different opinions on medicine and what I need to do to take care of myself, but I listen and learn and take a little bit from both sides. Early on, the naturopath wanted to do some testing on my adrenal glands. You know, the adrenal glands, what pumps out adrenaline, what gives you energy. And I remember he tested me twice, maybe 3 times, you know, the crazy spit in a little tube and then X hours later, spit again in another little tube and whatever. And at that point, gosh, I was not young, but I was probably in my early 50s. After all the testing, I remember the naturopath looking at me almost astonished. I remember he had tested a second time because he didn't seem to believe the accuracy of the first test. And he said, Jeannie, you're too young for this, but you've burned out your adrenal glands. They're flat. And when I asked him at that point what I could do to resurrect them, because again, it's the source of adrenaline and energy, he said, we can do some other things to prop them up, but once they're gone, they're pretty gone. Am I proud of that? No, no. Did I do it on purpose? Absolutely not. As a younger woman in ministry wanting to be the best helpmate to Jeanne Mayo I could be, and also the best mom I could ever be to raising 2 amazing sons, I look back, I'm not sure a whole lot really in my mind would have changed. But the point is that I think in my later years, this was probably for me late 40s, early 50s, I think now I've learned to be a lot more aware of my pit stops. And I think that's part of the reason why I'm still able to be in the ministry, why I still love Jesus very sincerely. And though I've had bumps with the local church, I still love the local church very sincerely. And by God's grace, I'm still determined to dodge the cynicism that I see all around. An interesting definition for busy, B-U-S-Y, being under Satan's yoke. Isn't that true? You know, and again, I'm not talking about just sitting around and doing nothing. But for me, I had to learn a more measured pace. Now, if you don't ever deal with this, you probably are kind of on the other side, the bit lazy side. So some of you don't need to hear this at all, but I bet way more of us do. Let me give you a few of what I've tried out, some suggestions for what I call short but more frequent pit stops. And the biggest thing I'm going to say to you is automate all of these. Put them on a calendar. If you're married, you communicate to your family, your spouse. Make them things that happen without your having to decide each month if you're going to do it. If you automate them by putting them on a calendar and not giving that time away, it makes all the difference in the universe. Number one, consider planning ahead on your calendar to disappear for a full 24 hours every 3 months. So you're only going to do it 4 times a year. It may be on a weekend, a Saturday. You may have another day off depending on what your employer grants to you. They may even allow you to take it as official time off with them, but most of the time, at least in my journey, it had to be considered vacation time if it wasn't a Saturday. And when my kids are at home, I love doing Saturdays with them. Just 24 hours. I went alone. Sometimes I'd just go to a local Hampton Inn, some cheesy hotel. Other times I got real fancy and rented out a little cabin not far away in the mountains. One time I stayed in somebody's basement and just said, let me just kind of have this time to myself. I mean, it was nothing amazing. All of you who camp, I mean, that'd be a great idea for you, but I'm not a very good camper. Having said that, just 24 hours that I did things that were heavenly, like sleeping in, not setting my alarm. Isn't it crazy, though, when you don't set your alarm, you wake up anyway? And then mornings, most of them, when those alarms are set, when they go off, you'd give anything to have another half hour. God bless snooze, by the way. I hit it several times this morning. But 24 hours to sleep, do whatever feels replenishing to you, whether it's going to a cool coffee shop and reading, whether it's walking in a wooded outdoor area, whether it's playing some hoops, going for another round of golf, or if you're me, going to an altered state dress store by myself and walking around. Don't have to buy anything, just love to walk around there. And then somewhere through that, getting a little extra time with the Lord. Just chilling. No pressure, not feeling like you're unspiritual that you didn't spend the whole day with him. I usually didn't. Just a little extra time. And talking to him when I was relaxed and there was no awareness of another appointment in X minutes that I've got to be able to get out of the house or out of the office too. Gosh, heavenly. 24 hours every 3 months. And if you're married, I suggest that you take care of the kids so that your spouse can do the same thing. Now, the obvious question, should we do that together? And you've got to decide on your own. I just knew that some of the things I enjoyed doing were not the same things that would relax my husband. And so I would take some time alone. And, you know, his idea of time gloriously off would be to find a Sunday when he didn't have to preach and going to 3 or 4 different churches because he just loved going to different churches and picking up ideas. Me, I wasn't that spiritual. So we kind of had a different idea of what was replenishing. 24 hours on that calendar every 3 months. It sounds so little, but gosh, done consistently, it makes so much difference. And I wrote to myself, unplugging from social media. I always answered my kids and my husband, but that was it in those 24 hours. I told my staff, you know, I'm just going to break away to let myself replenish for 24 hours. And again, I used it as vacation time. Many of you will have to do the same. It's a great, worthwhile venture. Or using one of those days off, a Saturday or something. I lots of times would feel guilty. I think we all relate to that. I'm a 2 in the Enneagram. I've told you that 1,000 times. So, gosh, my fault, nobody else's. I feel guilty over a bunch of stuff. But again, nobody can make me feel guilty unless I buy the ticket. Same thing with all of us. And so, for those of you that have consciences that easily scream a little bit too much in your head, I understand. I understand. But uh, have the courage to push through that, even at points that you feel awkward. And then, and again, I've said this over and over, but I keep wanting to say it. The key to all of this is automating it. In other words, put it on your calendar ahead of time and don't change it. Replenishment day, whatever you want to call it. Have you ever heard of Henry Nouwen? I hope you have. One of my favorite guys to read. A wonderful Christian leader. And listen to what he said in one of his writings. As I entered my 50s, I came face to face with this simple question. Did becoming older actually bring me closer to Jesus? Did you hear that? Did becoming older actually bring me closer to Jesus? That's a profound question. Henry Nouwen went on to say, after 25 years in the full-time priesthood, I found myself often praying poorly, living more isolated from other people, and preoccupied with my own burning issues that were probably not nearly so burning in the face of Jesus Christ. Other people were celebrating me, but something inside of me was telling me that my own success was putting my own soul in danger. Isn't that true? My own success, whatever that is for all of us, was putting my own soul in danger. If you haven't listened to it, if you get Legacy and the playbook, all my resources, you want to be able to find, it's a video from one of my National Youth Leaders conferences, and I called it The Dragon of Success. It was way back at NYLC 2015. It is worth giving a listen to, because I have to remind myself often that that dragon called success can slowly eat away at the inside of me. I think ministry makes all of us, if we're not very aware, threatened by what I call ministry AAA. Not just AA, but AAA. Adrenaline, ambition, achievement. Nothing's wrong with any of those three. But easily, when they come together for sustained times, they can slowly freeze out the inside of our soul. Lots of times it's easy for all of us to kind of psychologically wait until we can take 5 to 7 days off on that magic thing called vacation. But again, to keep yourself fresh, calendar just some shorter, briefer breaks, because they will make all the difference, not only in your spiritual resiliency, but also your emotional resiliency. They will make all the difference in how you treat your family, how you treat people around you, how you deal with your own anger levels. I love a quote by Alicia Sholey. If you haven't read her book, Anonymous, it's worth the read. She says, From God's perspective, anonymous seasons are sacred spaces, unapplauded, but never unproductive. Hidden seasons or hidden years are often the surprising birthplace of true spiritual greatness. Isn't that true? Seasons. I understand that. When some things have happened in my ministry and certain vital aspects that I loved of my ministry were no longer, I understand. And I was never uh, absolutely anonymous, but I understand feeling a great deal more anonymous. And I've heard, so many times, the whispers of the enemy saying, your best days are behind. The future is not fulfilling, and all sorts of lies that go with that. But I will tell you, though I've not quite honestly enjoyed a lot of it, some of the anonymous times, even though I've been in ministry but had certain key things that have been a part of my life, staff life and everything, for over 50 years went away, I've realized, I think, I've become a better Christ follower. I say that softly because nobody can figure that out but Jesus. But I think the fruit has been precious in my life, though I have not always enjoyed it. And let me give you another interesting insight from the book Anonymous. Jesus was born in Bethlehem in a smelly animal pen, followed by a few hidden days. He was then circumcised in the temple on his 8th day, followed by a few hidden months. Before turning 2, if you study most of this, it wasn't just Christmas night, Jesus received a visit from the Eastern wise men, where they honored and worshiped him, followed by hidden years. And at the age of 12, Jesus taught in the temple, followed by almost 2 entirely hidden decades. So the hidden moments continued to peak right up until that small window where he had public ministry. Jesus knew that in kingdom leadership, unseen did not mean unimportant. How can I parallel this? I think the easiest people to take for granted in your life are the people you're around the most, whether it be your family, the staff you work with, your closest friends. Gosh, anybody that you're with several days in the week, it's really easy to take those people for granted. You know, I have a little quote in some of my notes that says, it is precisely the most important people in our life that we easily allow the enemy to make feel the most common. Having said that, gosh, I think we do the same thing to Jesus. Have you ever thought Jesus says that he's the same yesterday, today, and forever? But in some ways, that sameness, that consistency can work against him. He's not playing hide and seek games with us. He's not saying, hey, talk to me this long in prayer today and you'll get some of my attention. His love is not earned, it is given. And this amazing Jesus, who is the same yesterday, today, and forever, like many of the people in our life, his sameness can allow the enemy to almost speak taking for granted. And at the worst case, a bit of emotional boredom. So I think without some meaningful pit stops along the journey, our heart for Jesus, as well as, like I said, our perspective on our family, our friends, our ministry, the whole 9 yards, becomes slowly warped, distorted, just not what it was when we started. Go back to that Henry Nouwen quote. Do you love Jesus now more than when you started? Now, at the beginning of your following Christ, there was more emotion with it. I get it. And the emotion for all of us subsides. But in your deep heart of hearts, how's your commitment level? That's what I'm talking about. Then another suggestion I would give to you is consider what I would call a non-glamorous, non-feeling spiritual retreat, even if you just do one a year. Usually that would be 48 hours or so. My amazing friend Richard Crisco, who was part of the Brownsville revival, and we've been close friends for years, does this every single Friday. And I'm so absolutely overwhelmed by his consistency. See, here's the deal. He takes 24 hours with the Lord and goes to a little location, no social media, just his Bible and his journal and Jesus. And he talks about how so many times that time is laborious. It's boring. It's clawing to get through. He makes it clear to us that those times with his spiritual retreat, his is one day a week. Gosh, I would not, again, have the courage to even suggest that for all of you. But if maybe one day every 6 months, or maybe a couple of days, whatever. But unlike the earlier breakaway I suggested, this is just simply to have some quality time with Jesus. You won't feel a whole lot when you're doing it. It's not like you can expect the angels to pop in. Again, go to somebody's basement, ask them to leave you alone, or, a cheap Hampton Inn or something. Or if there's a monastery or somewhere around, or a retreat center that you could just be somewhere where the environment and the outdoors is replenishing to you. But I just want to stress, coming after Jesus in a focused way like that is really much like exercise. Everybody told me that if I exercise enough, I'll look forward to it. That hasn't happened yet, and I still stink at exercise. The point is, you do certain things not because you feel emotionally motivated, but because you have enough wisdom to know the fruit of that. And these little bit by bits make all the difference in the world. And then I haven't talked about it, but obviously when it comes to your vacation time, many of you, employer-wise, get a week. And gosh, I know how precious that week of vacation is. If you have a very kind boss, you may get a paid 2 weeks, or many of you had to work for a year to even get that first week. So I tremendously get it. Whatever it is, plan those days well. Let me tell you what worked for Sam and for me. We used to take, we had 2 weeks, and we would take 1 week with our children. And we let them, as they got a little older, choose the vacation location. Like one time, it was so funny. When they were quite young, Justin wanted to go to a zoo where there were penguins, and Josh wanted to fly in an airplane because he'd never flown before. So guess where we went for our vacation? We went to Columbus, Ohio. Did I have family there? Did Sam have? Nope. Nope. Here's the bottom line. There used to be, there's not anymore. There used to be a SeaWorld there. So Justin got his penguins, and we could get a reasonable flight from, at that point, we were in Nebraska, to Columbus. And gosh, that was about, I remember the SeaWorld day, it rained the whole day. It wasn't very exciting. The flight was pretty short, but having said that, you know, our kids every year, and as they got older, they got more exciting plans. So 1 week was with them. And then the second week was what Sam and I always called our honeymoon vacation. And you know what? We started doing it just because we knew that we wanted to give our kids an amazing picture of a mom and dad that, though not perfect, stayed very much in love with each other. And all the counselors tell you over and over again, if you want to give your children a good gift, as the Lord makes it possible. And some of you have had some situations that made it impossible, but as the Lord makes it possible, you fight for a healthy marriage. So Sam and I would take what we called on purpose our honeymoon vacation. Most of the time we didn't have enough money to do anything cool. As we got along in years, we did the Cancun moments, but in most of those early years, not so. It was literally Hampton Inn, and we would drive, gosh, just a couple of hours over to some non-exciting place. When we were in Nebraska, we'd go to Des Moines, Iowa. And, you know, that certainly was not the glorious place. We'd take books with us, and we'd sleep, and we had long meals together, and we caught up with each other. We weren't together the whole time. We'd take, you know, you do your thing this afternoon, I'll do mine, we'll meet back at this restaurant or whatever. But the point is, we worked to keep our marriage fresh. And it made a difference. It made a difference. And so whatever your length of paid vacation is, 1 week, and I know some of you are so amazing, you get none. And gosh, you are so amazing because you take your paid vacation to take children or teenagers to youth camp. Listen, there is a crown so big for you in heaven, I cannot even feel it or conceive it. So thank you. If you're part of those people, there is no vacation for you, because youth camp is certainly not vacation. But if you have the privilege of having a few paid days off, think it through. But the mistake you make is waiting until that moment to take a break. Please don't do that. Again, automate it. Put it on your calendar a year in advance and do it. And when you get up close to it, you won't feel like it. Oh, I don't need a day off. I need to get this done, or I need to do this, whatever it is. But I just want to say to all of you, you do need it. And it will make all the difference in the universe. Let me retrace an account that a friend had. Didn't happen to me, happened to a friend, but I thought it to be so powerful. And I relate to my friend in this. Every once in a while, not often, but every once in a while, it's fulfilling for me if I watch a handicapped person, or perhaps a very elderly person, getting off an airplane and struggling with bags, you know, to help them push a bag down the skinny little airplane row. But my friend was especially good at doing that for people. And as he shared the story, he talked about this one specific lady, quite elderly, and she had struggled getting her bag aligned. And we've all had that going down those skinny little aisles. And so he was helping her, and obviously waited until near the end because he didn't have any connections, anything that was hurrying him up. And they walked slowly towards baggage claim. And when they arrived at baggage claim, he described this scene. There was a very elderly man sitting on a little bench near baggage claim. And the minute he saw her, he lit up. He lit up, and the little man struggled hard to stand up using his cane, and then kind of slowly scuffled his way over to her as she was waiting for her baggage, and then planted a kiss on her little elderly lips that would have made most newlyweds very jealous. As my friend looked on at the scene, all he knew was that this sweet elderly couple were in the twilight years. Their looks had faded. Their physical strength was weakened. There were no fanfares when she came to town, no limo, no big parade, no media. There was just one person there to greet her. Chances are, because of their age, if they had had children, those kids had already gone on. They had their own life. And so she had one person greeting her. But that was the one person who was the person she'd most intentionally built intimacy with. Obscurity didn't matter. Only relationship did. So here's my honest truth. Gosh, I'm a few years older than I like admitting. I don't feel that old, but my husband has already beat me to heaven. My adult kids are in their 40s. They're amazing. They're wonderful, but it's not like they're hanging out with me. Even just a couple of days ago, I went to church Easter Sunday, and Josh and Monica and the boys grabbed a quick lunch with me because it was spring break and they were going to take a couple of days off with their sons during spring break. They were driving to Florida. Hey, their life has gone on. And I returned home. And I wrote some simple notes, and I think you'll relate to that. I said to Jesus and myself, someday all the trappings of life, of career, of ministry will fade away. But if we've done the simple things to maintain our closeness to Jesus, not feeling, but our commitment to him, if we've done the 24 hours here and the 2 hours there, obscurity really won't matter. Only relationship will. And as I sat on my beige couch in the living room where a bunch of you have sat during cadres, having some sweet moments with Jesus Easter night, obscurity didn't matter. Relationship did. Why is the relationship what it is? It's because I've calendared it. I've made it important. And I would urge you to do the same thing. Pit stops, they're required. Be sure to listen in to this month's Legacy Stood Up Again. You'll love it, and the skit is worth repeating. Thanks for letting me be in your life.
Thanks again for being part of Jeanne's Youth Leaders Coach. Make sure to join us for her 100X Leadership Podcast. Don't forget Jen Elliott's immortal challenge to us all. He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. We look forward to being with you again next month for Jeanne Mayo's Youth Leaders Coach.